Had a great Thanksgiving. I want to tell you, prime rib's a whole lot better than turkey. That's all I can tell you. We enjoyed that. Welcome to our online family and our other campuses. And now with Thanksgiving behind us, we start the Christmas run. And before we go there, I just want you to thank a couple of teams who have been doing some amazing work around here. You can tell some of the Christmas decorations are on the way. There have been people working hours getting ready for the setup to Christmas. You saw that there's some decorations out there in the lobby today. Hey, give the team that's been working overtime to do that a hand, all right? And then you've seen the last number of weeks, we've had a table set up outside the lobby, out here in the lobby, and you've been able to be a part of the shoe boxes again, the Christmas shoe box. And I think in, 2 years ago, we did like 3,700, which is great, and 3,900 last year, I believe. This year, we did over 4,100. And so give that team that's been doing all that work, thanks to you guys as well for the investment in that. I think, if I remember right, from the area, we saw over 18,000 of those boxes go out. That means 18,000 kids somewhere in the world that will receive a gift and a gospel presentation that we are told hits 8 different people in each box. So do the math. That's a lot of people who are going to be hearing the good news of God's love through Jesus. That's amazing. So we praise God for that ministry, and for those who you know who you are, thank you so much for all the work you do there. Well, today we continue in our series on the 10 Commandments called 10 Keys to the Life You've Always Wanted. And today we're looking at the 8th commandment. Anybody know what the 8th commandment is? You shall not steal. Yeah, Exodus 20, verse 15, you shall not steal. Stated positively, God is saying you are to respect the possessions of others. I can still recall quite vividly that night in the locker room. I think I've told you about this before. I don't remember, either junior high, freshman year, whatever. I think it was following a game of pickup basketball, and I was earnestly desiring a can of cherry soda from the pop machine. Did others of you call it pop? We didn't call it soda. Where I was from, it was pop, all right? But I was lacking the necessary change, which was quite often in those days. And I was trying to figure out how I could get that soda. Something inside my head said, well, no one's down here, so why don't you check a few lockers, see if you can't find a little bit of change. I mean, it's only 50 cents. It's not like it's going to hurt anyone that much. So my heart kind of pounding away, keeping an eye on both doors of the locker room. I opened the locker in which were hanging someone's clothes. I didn't know whose. I reached in the pants pocket, and bingo, I hit the jackpot. That guy, I think, had enough change for maybe 10 cans of pop. So I reasoned he wouldn't miss a couple of quarters. I quickly took 50 cents, went and deposited it in the pop machine, drank down that soda, tried to act as if nothing had happened. And I told myself, it's only 50 cents, no big deal. But here I am, 47 years or more later, and guess what? I've never forgotten it. And I asked myself, how is it that out of the hundreds of cans of soda that I've downed in my lifetime, I remember that one best of all? And how is it that the one can I remember most and the one can I thought I wanted most, I distinctly remember deriving the least satisfaction from? How is it, I wondered then, could something that sweet leave such a bitter taste in my mouth when it was done? And while I was never able to make restitution with that 50 cents because I didn't know who I had stolen it from, I learned a valuable lesson from that can of pop. And that is that you can never attain the life you really want if you resort to crooked measures to get what you want. Because if you have to lie, cheat, and steal to get what you want, you either have to deaden your conscience to do it, which inevitably will lead to disaster. God gave us a conscience for a reason. Or if you don't deaden your conscience, you will have to live with such a guilty conscience that you can't enjoy what you cheated to get anyway. Either way, you lose. Thus, the only way to get the life you want is to do it God's way. In the 8th commandment, God's intent is to lay out various boundaries concerning the way in which we are to acquire our possessions, while at the same time protecting the possessions and the dignity of others. Now, I want you to think about this, because if you've ever been ripped off, you feel violated. And this is why Jesus in the New Testament taught us that we don't go around necessarily focus on law keeping, but that his command is fulfilled through love. If I love you, I am not seeking to rip you off. I'm not wanting to steal something from you. See what I'm saying? Every command finds its fulfillment in love. God knew all about the deep-seated sin problem of the human heart, which would lead us to devise ways of acquiring something for nothing, even if it meant ripping others off in the process. And he says, just forget the rip-off games, because I've ordained that you will succeed in life only if you play by the rules. Thus, we first need to be clear about what exactly God is prohibiting through this commandment, because there's probably more to it than meets the eye. So I want to look at some of the obvious and not so obvious forms of rip-off artistry going on today, what I'll call 6 common rip-off games people play. Game number 1, we'll just call it the proactive heist. This is the one we think of when we hear this commandment. This is what we know as blatant stealing. Again, it's where our minds immediately go when we hear the command, do not steal. This is flat out scheming and then taking what isn't yours. Sticking a candy bar in your pocket and walking out of the supermarket. Spotting $10 on somebody's desk and taking it. Combing through someone's pant pocket in the locker room. Looking for 50 cents and taking it. That's called the proactive heist. And I doubt that anyone here seriously questions the wrongness of such activity. We all know that it's wrong to just walk into a store or into someone else's house or to break into somebody's car and take something that does not belong to us. At least I thought we all knew that until we have begun to see what's happening in the United States these days, as people just indiscriminately go out and loot stores and think nothing of it. Most of us have probably been on the other side of this rip-off game, and we know how deeply offensive it is to us when someone steals from us. I've been on a board now for about 4 years, a board called Pure Desire, ministry designed to help bring healing and freedom to those bound by sexual sin. And 11 times out of the year, we meet via Zoom. And one time a year, we come together face to face and have our retreat, which is usually out in the Portland or Seattle area. In October of 2019, Susan and I had arrived early. We checked into the camp accommodations where we'd be staying for that retreat, and we were getting ready to go meet the rest of the board as we would begin the retreat with a meal at a really nice restaurant. We thought, you know what, let's just take our clothes out of the car, put our suitcases in the room. And then I thought, I don't know for sure where we're gonna have our opening. We would meet after the meal and kind of have an opening session. And I'm thinking, I maybe will need my computer and my briefcase for that. So I kept that in the car. We headed over to the restaurant. Board members had to take pictures, ate a great meal. Sun was just going down. I mean, this is broad daylight. And I'm walking back to my rental car, and I see somebody sweeping up glass next to it. And I look up, and the window of the passenger side, or the passenger driver's side, has been smashed out. I'm like, what the heck? That's my rental car. And the next thing I know, sure enough, what they call a smash and grab, they had taken off with my briefcase and got away with my computer, thing that I was most bothered by. That bag had my Bible in it, my travel Bible, which I took on all my tours and all of my travels. I had like 15 years worth of personal notes and Bible study outlines and this type of thing. I was just sick. I was like, God, they can have the computer, but in all likelihood, they aren't going to read my Bible. So could I have that back, please? And needless to say, I didn't make the meeting that night, as I spent the next few hours taking that rental car back to the rental car company, securing another rental car. And so the meeting's essentially over by the time I finally catch up with the rest of the board. But I just remember how violated I felt. And God says to us, don't do that to anyone. Not only does it violate the one from whom you steal, but it contaminates the soul and hardens the conscience of the one who steals. I mean, imagine the chaos in a society where anyone's possessions were open season for anyone else and where everyone just ran by the motto, you know, what's mine is mine and what's thine is mine as well. As I said, is becoming increasingly the case in the United States these days, and we've even been told to quit calling it looting. I'm like, okay, let's call it what God calls it. It's stealing. Does that make it better? We intuitively know that grabbing for ourselves what belongs to someone else is stealing. And so only the most brazen among us engage in the proactive heist. But, see, some of us will sit here and say, I certainly don't do that. There are other ripoff games people play. So this game number 2, we're gonna call it the passive heist. So we got the proactive heist, where you just go out and steal something. This is the passive heist, and it refers to the act of defrauding someone, keeping them from what is rightfully owed. In this case, you didn't walk in and take what wasn't yours. Rather, you are keeping for yourself what rightfully belongs to someone else. And call it what you want, justify it however you like. God calls it stealing. It could be stalling the landlord for 6 months on the rent check, failure to pay your college loan, withholding child support, not declaring all of your earned income, using company time for personal errands, unless, of course, permission has been granted, not putting in a full day's work while taking home a full day's wages. That's defrauding, and it's a violation of this command. I mean, what's the difference between walking into your boss's office and taking $100 off of his desk, that's the proactive heist, and receiving $100 in wages for work you didn't do? That's the passive heist. Either way, your boss is out $100. You've taken it from him. Proverbs 18:9 says, he who is slack in his work, means you're not working the amount of time you should, you're not fully engaged when you are there, and consequently you are receiving more than what you should be. He who is slack in his work is a brother to the one who destroys or steals. Either way, you're hurting the company through a passive heist, if that's what you're doing. Game number 3, we could call the deceptive heist. This is acquiring something from someone else by means of deception. In fact, in many quarters today, it's called shrewd business practice. People who acquire money or possessions this way don't call it stealing because the other person technically gave it to them. It's just they did so under false pretext. One common practice is giving less than fair value for a monetary transaction. That's deception, and this is why Proverbs 11 says, the Lord abhors dishonest scales, but accurate weights are his delight. Guys, when the Bible tells you that God hates something, your ears better perk up. And I think it's amazing that even 3,500 years ago, when this proverb was written, merchants were already charging customers for a pound of meat and a half a pound of thumb. And God says, I don't like that, don't do it. One of my best friends, who's been gone now for probably 20 years, his name was Tom. He was a deacon and elder in my former church. He used to run a used car dealership. He told me about a man in my former church, Ed, who came to him one day because Ed was interested in a particular car Tom had on his lot. It had 75,000 miles on it. Ed decided it was too many miles for the price of the car, so he decided to pass on it. But a few days later, another small dealership called Tom wanting that particular car because someone was interested in it if they could find it. So Tom sold it to another dealership, small town nearby. Well, guess who came up driving that car one day? Here comes Ed in the car. He stops to see Tom. Said, Tom, you're not gonna believe it. I found the exact same year, exact same model, exact same color. The very car you had on your lot, I found in another dealership. Only this one had only 40,000 miles, and they only wanted $1,500 more for it than you were asking. Tom said, Cal, I didn't have the heart to tell him that he had just had $1,500 lifted from his wallet by a crooked dealership where through a little odometer tampering, the dealer had deceived Ed into believing he was getting more for his money when it was the exact same car that Tom had wanted to sell him a few days later or a few days earlier for $1,500 less. Now, someone might say, man, shrewd businessman. I think not. God calls it stealing. And he says anyone who operates that way will eventually come to ruin. You are not going to please the Lord your God through a deceptive heist. Game number 4, the opportunistic heist. Some call it price gouging. Others call it capitalism at its best. It's operating by the assumption that anything is worth whatever you decide to charge for it, or as the case may be, whatever you can con someone into paying for it. Friends, let me tell you that when a hurricane strikes the coast of Florida and does billions of dollars worth of damage, and homes need to be built, and virtually overnight the cost of lumber goes up 20 times, call it what you want to, but that is an opportunistic heist, and God calls it stealing. Plain and simple. I know it's common in this day and age to assume the American way is to get as much as you can, but here you go, guys. Top dollar on the seller's end had better be consistent with fair value on the buyer's end, or there's a ripoff game going on that doesn't cause God to smile. And I am capitalistic to the core. I do not buy all of this socialism and communism that people are wanting today, but I can tell you this, unless capitalism has boundaries that are controlled, in other words, capitalistic greed will bring the whole thing down. There have to be boundaries. I find it interesting that when God set this up in his economy with his people, there were boundaries. Look at what Leviticus chapter 25, verse 14 says. If you sell land to one of your countrymen, or you buy anything from him, do not take advantage of one another. And based upon this verse and what it means to not take advantage, to just not let greed go hog wild, because anything's worth what I can get somebody to pay for it. Jewish teachers and rabbis established a rule. I wish we had this rule in the United States. It'd solve a lot of problems. They established a rule that a seller could not charge more than 1/6 the market value, nor could the buyer pay less than 1/6 below the market value unless the other party was aware that they were either overpaying or underselling the object. And what is unusual about this law is the protection given the merchant for not getting swindled. The Bible is concerned that buyers get a fair deal and that sellers make a fair profit, and that in the process, no one gets ripped off. God is not in favor of the opportunistic heist. I think it would be awesome just as a church if we started thinking, just think as a business person, 1/6 of the value, either up or down, and that's the boundaries in which we operate. That's the opportunistic heist. Let me see, I'm on to, the silent heist is another one here. This is fairly common. The silent heist. This is remaining quiet about what you know to be an error, and your silence is gaining for you something that rightfully belongs to someone else. It's not telling the cashier that he or she gave you back too much change. It's not informing the store that they undercharged you. Well, their mistake, right? And I was tempted toward a silent heist several years ago when John and I were going to play a round of golf out at Oak Run. I would a lot of times do my study break out of the cabin there, and sometimes would just play a round of golf after I'd been studying for hours. And John had come out to join me, I think overnight. We were going to go hit a round of golf at the Oak Run golf course, and there's a little grocery store there. I had to go to the ATM to get the money for our golf round. And when I got to the ATM, there were already 420s just laying there, like they had been stuck. And after the person who was trying to get their withdrawal came in there to get it, they dropped in there, $80. And John was like, "Dad, God provided." And I was like, I was really wishing we could just say that and go with it. Wow. Pay for the whole, pay for a couple rounds of golf. But I knew I couldn't do that. I had to do the right thing, take it to the owners of the little grocery store. Let me tell you what was going on in my mind. Well, it's not theirs either. What if they just take it? So I might as well just keep it, right, to make sure. I told them, I said, "I know it's not yours either, so I'm hoping you do the right thing with it." I said, "Somebody's going to probably come looking for it." I just knew it wasn't mine to keep, even though I could have gotten away with it and no one would have known. But I would have known, God would have known, and my son would have known, and I would have communicated in the process that a silent heist is okay, and no round of golf was worth that to me. God's not okay with it when he says, "Do not steal." He's also saying, don't you stay silent about things that come to you that don't belong to you. Here's number 6. Game number 6 is what I call the unintentional heist. This is an act of irresponsible borrowing. And probably all of us are guilty at some time or another of irresponsible borrowing. And it's due more to our insensitivity and carelessness than anything else. Here, the intent of the borrower is not to steal. So there is a difference in motive. However, when examined from the effect upon the person borrowed from, is essentially the same as a proactive heist, because the lender is out his possession and the borrower has gotten something for nothing and has something in his possession that doesn't belong to him. I imagine most of us at one time or another have been guilty of this one. As I said, just teaching this one caused me to start looking around and saying, okay, is there anything in my office or my garage that I forgot to return to its rightful owner? See, a lot of us would never think of just blatantly taking what isn't ours, but essentially the same thing happens through irresponsible borrowing. It might be borrowing the company's property for personal use, utilizing professional expenses for a personal expenditure, sending personal mail at the company's expense. Or let's get Even more personal, how about the borrowing of a neighbor's shovel or ladder or hedge or trimmers or more or book, etc., and not returning it? No, the intent of your heart wasn't to steal that thing, but the effect on the owner is the same. He or she is still missing what you failed to return. You have gotten something for nothing. Or how about returning it in obviously worse condition than when you received it? I mean, what difference is there in just taking $40 from your neighbor and the $40 he had to pay to fix or replace something that you ruined? Or what difference is there in taking $20 from your neighbor and returning his borrowed car with $20 less gas in it than when you borrowed it? I know how this one feels. I remember what it was like not to have a car at school, and others would let you borrow theirs, so that when I got my car, I was going to be gracious in letting other people borrow it. But I know what it's like to go to the car and see that somebody has just slammed a tire. The tire is now flat. The rim is all messed up. There's hardly any gas in it. And I feel violated and angry because somebody has taken advantage of my generosity. And I went to the person and said, dude, tire's flat in the car. And again, he's busy. He's running over to play basketball or something. I didn't do it. Guess whose job it was to take care of that tire? You see? So there wasn't anything intentional on the person's part to say, rip me off. So this one's not as severe as outright stealing, perhaps, but the point is that intentional or unintentional, God calls for a moratorium on our rip-off games, however they happen. Because the bottom line, if you haven't bought it, earned it honestly, been given it, or inherited it, it belongs to someone else and should be respected as such. Which means that things coming to you either by planned deception or by accident must not be considered your own and must be returned. And maybe sitting here this morning, this all seems obvious, but then we get it out into the real world, and when faced with a situation in which we're tempted to justify playing one of these games, we start coming up with excuses. I wonder if you've heard these things in your mind, like finders, keepers, losers, weepers. Right? Just because I found it, it's mine. It never dawned on me that maybe the reason I found it is because someone else lost it and would really like it back. So friends, I'm not sure we should ever call something ours until and unless we have made a concerted effort to find its rightful owner. Or we say, well, I didn't steal it if it was their mistake. Right? You're in the grocery store, you notice that a $15 mistake has been made in your favor. Well, you know what we do when the $15 is in their favor. We make a deal about that one. But what if it's in your favor? Do you tell them or don't you? It's amazing how many people think that they have a right to possess something they do not own simply because it's in their possession. And believe me, you will be tested here every so often just to reveal the condition of your heart. So my question is, have you been passing the tests? Third excuse, well, they can afford to do without it. This is the preferred rationale given by people who steal from large department stores, large corporations, or banks. That same rationale holds for people who file frivolous insurance claims, medical malpractice, and other lawsuits. They feel like the individual, it's not an individual they're suing, but man, it's the big store, it's the big corporation, and you know what? They can afford to do without it. Some people say, well, I haven't really taken anything. This is one of the more popular rationales in this category are people who lie about the ages of their children to get discounts for movies, theme parks, meals, airline travel. These people believe that they have used legitimate means to save money. The only problem is they have lied, and in doing so, they have stolen money from that business. I'm reminded of an encounter I had in Atlanta several years ago. While on my study break, I was down there. I would stay at a beautiful lake house property, preach on one Sunday when I went in, do my study break for a week, and then preach the next Sunday before I left. And they had asked me to do 2 sessions on leadership. And the very first Sunday, I was to speak on the most important quality in leadership, and that was integrity. So I preached that message, went on my week study break, came back to preach the next Sunday, whereupon a young mother came up to me after the service and said, Cal, you can't believe how God just hit me right between the eyes with what you taught last Sunday. She said, after the service, we went out to a fairly fancy restaurant with another couple. And she said, I don't have the money to eat at these places. And my daughter is small for her age. She's 6, but she's a very light eater. And therefore, this mother said, I didn't want to buy her a full meal. The problem is, she said, on the menu it said children 5 and under can receive a meal for half price. So when the waitress came around, she said, I jumped in, I ordered for myself and then for my daughter, but I told the waitress, she's 5, so we just want one of the half-price meals. At which point her daughter just busted her right in front of the waitress and everybody else when she said, Mom, did you forget how old I am? I'm 6, almost 7. And this lady is standing there telling me, Cal, if there was ever a time when I wanted the earth to just open up and swallow me, you know. And she finally did. She said, I'm so sorry. I sat here and lied to you. And I don't remember whether they still gave her the half price or whatever, but she was just talking about, oh, you talk about an embarrassing episode of being called out. I've learned my lesson, you know. But it just underscores the fact that when we keep from someone what is rightfully theirs, regardless of our motives, guys, it's stealing. It's what it is. It's ripping them off. Or how about, let me meddle a little bit more, I work here, so I deserve it. Many employees think nothing of taking home office supplies. I'm going, okay, but did you check to see whether you could take them home, or did you just, oh, well, I'm not going to tell anybody about it? One author says, I love this, she said, writing pads, pens, folders, and desk lamps are not kept in stock as door prizes. If you take something without permission, regardless of whether you were there, whether you work there or not, folks, that's stealing. So let's get rid of our excuses and our justifications, and let's start taking this commandment seriously. So the question is, what can I do to ensure that I stay sensitive to this issue in my life, that I live within the spirit of this law, not just I don't just do the outward thing. Well, I never took anything. I want the spirit of my heart to be, God, I want to love people well. I'm not looking to rip them off. What do I do to live within the spirit of this law and just retain that sensitivity to the Holy Spirit? So I call this a couple keys to rip-off proofing your heart. So let's just quickly look at it. What are in response to that? I don't want to play these games, so how do I rip-off proof my heart? Here's key number 1. Demand absolute honesty of your heart, even in the smallest things. The Bible says, this is David, Psalm 51 and verse 6, surely you desire truth in the inward parts. God doesn't want you to be one of those that just plays games and the Holy Spirit is knocking your heart. You know you're not being truthful right now and you just keep coming up with your excuse. No. God, I want to give you truth in the inward parts. So you got to get gut level honest with yourself if you're going to build a rip-off proof heart, and that demands a constant vigilance in examining your heart and insisting on absolute honesty even in the smallest things, because Jesus taught if you're faithful in the small areas, you will be faithful in the larger areas. One guy I read about convicted me about something I've done before, really hadn't considered to be stealing. Now, we don't go to a lot of movies, but I remember doing this back in the day with the kids, this type of thing. This guy writes, anytime my wife would take the kids to the movie, she would buy them candy from the grocery store for them to eat while watching. I figured the theaters had rules against bringing in your own goodies, but I didn't really know for sure. I've been too embarrassed to ask, but I've always felt a little bit sheepish about bringing in candy to save money. Now, you guys know the theaters do have those rules. No outside candy or sodas, right? You buy from the concessions there. Or at least ask them since you're gonna, before you sneak something in. Okay, if I take this in? I don't know too many people who do that. But he says, one time we were headed to the movie. I participated in the buying of the candy beforehand, but told the kids to keep their candy hidden until we were actually in the darkened theater, as it was against the rules. At which point, one of the kids spoke up and said, well, if it's against the rules, why are we doing it? This dad concludes, I have to tell you that neither I nor my wife has ever tried it again. And again, the point is, even if you consider the theater concession stands to be a ripoff, guess what? The answer is not for you to rip them off the other way around by taking your own food in and to avoid having to pay for theirs. That's not honest. Now, I hope I didn't ruin somebody's movie going here, okay? But it is to say, demand absolute honesty of your heart. And I'm just giving you some of the little places that we can tend to cheat and say, well, this one really doesn't matter. Here's key number 2. Make restitution wherever possible. Now, I can't go back and give that 50 cents. I have no idea whose pant pocket I took that out of. But did I? I would have gone to him a long time ago and handed him back probably $1 and said, I'm sorry, I ripped you off. There's some instances where I was telling this wasn't in my notes, so you guys won't have to pay extra for this today. But I was on my way to a conference up in Chicago a few years ago, and where I needed to exit, and this was before you had the iPass and everything, there was just a basket into which you're supposed to flip your change, and there was no teller, there was nobody there on duty. I didn't have any change with me. I'm not trying to rip anybody off. I got to get to the conference. I'm looking over my shoulder, and there's a car on the shoulder back here. I'm going, I don't know if that's a cop or not, but this red light's going to go off when I go through here. And there's a sign right in front of me saying violators will be prosecuted, you know, this type of thing. I'm thinking, great, I'm going to end up at the conference, and there's going to be, you know, something in the paper that pastor on the way to the conference, you know, rips us off. Well, I was grateful I was able to get to the conference. No cop came after me or whatever. But I want you to know I was deeply sensitive the next day when I passed through on the other side to put in double what I had not put in on my way through. Why? I want a rip-off proof heart. I know I could have gotten away with it, been totally fine. I wanted them to have what I rightfully owed. So I know we often, when we're wrong, want easy forgiveness. But when it comes to stealing, repentance will manifest itself in an effort to make restitution. Do you remember when Zacchaeus, when we go to Israel, I love the place in Jericho, we go to what's called a Zacchaeus tree. It's one of those old sycamores. And it's right somewhere, we always say, if not here, near. And that's where Zacchaeus climbed up the sycamore tree to see Jesus. And you remember how Jesus said you could know that salvation had come to his life? Not that he earned his salvation, but the proof of his salvation was that he had a heart change. Zacchaeus was one of these tax collectors that ripped people off all the time. And he said, here and now, Lord, I give away half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have ripped anybody off, I'm going to give back 4 times what I've taken from them. And Jesus, just looking at that kind of heart, said, that is the kind of heart that you can tell my grace has hit. This is why biblically, now when you think of restitution, this is why biblically the punishment for one caught stealing was to pay back double what he had stolen. If one stole $20 and got caught, guess what? He didn't have to just give back the 20, he had to pay an additional $20 fine. Why? Well, it was so that the one who attempted to experience what it was like to steal $20 ends up experiencing what it's like to lose $20. The flip side of this is that if a person willingly made restitution, there was grace offered and the requirement wasn't quite as much. But the point is, if we're serious about building rip-off proof hearts, then we need to make restitution wherever possible for past actions. And parents, it's vitally important that we teach our children the rewards of doing the right thing when they are forced to make restitution for something that has been stolen. Right? Walk with them back to the grocery store and, you help your child to say, forgive me, but I took something that wasn't mine. This type of thing. One dad talks about his son, Daniel, who in junior high ripped a bag of cookies off the teacher's desk and ate them. And it was found out. The dad told the principal, throw the book at him, Because, whenever you stole something like that, particularly from a teacher, it was a one-day suspension. Now, the dad supervised the suspension himself by making the guy weed the garden and mow the lawn and wash the car. And then he said, we jumped in the van and I made him take some of his own money, and we went down and bought flour and chocolate chips and all kinds of things, and I made him, he made enough cookies for the entire class. And the next day, Dad walked him back and had the teacher come out in the hallway where he apologized to her and said, I'm the one that stole the cookies off your desk. I want to ask your forgiveness. And then he said, if you don't mind, I want to go in and ask the classes forgiveness as well. And while he was telling them that, and to make restitution, I've made cookies for us all. And of course, the place exploded in applause and all this type of thing. And at the end of the day, Daniel told his dad that more than one of his friends told him it was so cool that he told the truth and then shared with the class. That dad asked, how can we tell our kids to be responsible and make restitution for their actions if we don't show them how? And not just show them how, if we don't lead the charge when we're the ones that owe somebody restitution. Here's key number 3, the final one, is trust God to be your provider. I want you to think of this, guys. While the command, do not steal, is on the surface, a call to the honest acquisition of our possessions as well as to respect the possessions of others. Beyond that, it's also a call to depend upon God for that which we need. Rather than taking matters into our own hands and deciding that we will get what we want however we need to get it. God is saying, I don't want you stealing primarily because I am your provider. I want you to understand and believe that I am the one who will supply all your needs. I don't want you to scheme, manipulate, and to deceive to obtain things. Think about it, friends. The truth is, every time we steal something, whether large or small, we are in essence saying, I will be my own provider in this instance. We are saying, God, I don't trust you to give me what I want or need, so I'm just going to do what I have to in order to get it. No, when he's your provider, you can be confident of 2 things. 1, if it's not something God wants for you, then you're not going to want it even if you do get it. It's not going to satisfy. And 2, if it's something God wants for you, then you'll get it without having to steal it because he'll provide it. Allow him to be your provider. It's a critical key to the life you've always wanted. Amen? Come on, let's stand together. I want to pray for you before you go today. Just bow your head and your heart. And, we want to be in that spirit of David where he said, Lord, search my heart. Try my thoughts. See if there is any way in me that is out of line with you. Because if there is, Lord, I repent and I renounce that. And I pray that you would lead me in the way everlasting. And just before we go this morning, I also want to say to some of you who have maybe never put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ, you want to talk about getting ripped off? The enemy is ripping you off in the greatest way possible because Jesus Christ gave his life for you. He died on a cross to pay for your forgiveness, to give you eternal life, to give you the Holy Spirit right now to lead you and guide you, to give you eternal life when this life is over. And you're letting the enemy rip you off by telling you, oh, you don't need that. Don't let him rip you off like that. Maybe today you just need to say, Lord Jesus Christ, I want to belong to you. I place my life in your hands. I ask you to come into my life and forgive me and to give me new life. Give me the life I always wanted. Lord, your peace and your joy and your love ruling in my life. So I invite you to be my Lord and Savior today. And again, for those of you who do know the Lord, would you just let him know right now as you open your life to him, Lord, make me a man or woman of integrity to the core. I declare again that you are my provider. Therefore, I will trust you for what I need. And Lord, I refuse and I renounce every manner of rip-off games possible. I don't want anything to do with them. Make me a person of truth and integrity to the core because you live in this house, Lord. And I give you thanks for that in Jesus' mighty name. And everyone said, amen, amen, amen. God bless you guys. Thank you for being here today. And we'll look forward to seeing you again next week. You all have a great week. If you need prayer for anything, come on down. The prayer team will be here and would love to pray with you. God bless you guys.